Well, hello there. My name is HW, and thank you so much for watching or listening to the Tone Junkie Podcast. This is the first Tone Junkie Podcast, episode 2.0. We've been talking about it, but it's really episode, gosh, I don't even know what episode it is, but I'm going to look it up right now. But before I do, how about a little housekeeping? The new Tone Junkie Podcast, we're getting official.
Really?
We have like sponsors now. Not paying sponsors, but
okay.
sponsors. But totally sponsors. And the new Tone Junkie Podcast is brought to you by the Tone Junkie Loaded Kemper, available exclusively at British Audio. And that's not the only loaded Kemper you can get at British Audio.
I hear they have another one.
I heard they have another one too. And that other voice you hear is, of course, the famous, the Coca-Cola of the Kemper, the king of the Kemper, knighted by the Queen himself. It is Sir Michael of Brit.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I'm not a king of anything, but I appreciate it.
I don't know, king of twang, maybe king of no,
there's
probably
way
not that
better
title.
twangers than me too.
Oh, you're the king of something. I have heard it's episode 38, by the way, in case anyone's really keeping track.
38.
38. I was hoping to get to a round number, so like 50 could start, but it takes a long time to put up this beautiful wallpaper.
It is very green.
It is.
Are they going to be able to see this as well, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So on the video version, they'll see
Gotcha.
it. The audio version,
You just have to imagine this beautiful green wallpaper.
it's really something. I'll put it on Instagram and Facebook and people can see it.
I would like some pants like that.
It took my wife and her friend a good 90 minutes.
Oh, that long?
Which is impressive. And if you hear that rumbling upstairs, it's just the cleaning lady. And we, the production value is so high here that we, this is just the kind of thing that happens. It's also probably a little echoey in the room, but it is what it is. And we've asked the studio audience to be very quiet. Wait, sorry. I've screwed this up. No, this doesn't work. Okay, this is really... We've asked the studio audience, Michael, to be very quiet.
All right, yeah. That was like a charm.
And silence them automatically.
That's funny.
I have heard your signal chain described as sort of the golden signal chain, the perfect signal chain.
Yeah, and it's a big crock of. Yeah.
There
is no golden signal chain.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, so how have you done it?
My very first profiles were done on a Mackie mixer, a 1202 Mackie mixer. No outboard preamps. Literally, if that's the magic signal. And I still go back to some of those earliest ones when I was just using a Mackie.
Right.
And then as I got more into it and did more profiles, I would borrow and steal, beg, whatever. I'd got Chandler, API, all these nice preamps and done all this. And then I'll be darned if I didn't just go back to the old Mackie mixer every now and then and just to check. And I don't think it matters that much. I mean, if I'm doing studio stuff for an album, I'll just send my Kemper to the engineer and he can run it through a Chandler API, whatever he wants to run it through.
Sure, yeah.
And so I don't feel like I have to bake it in.
So that's a really interesting point, is that by not baking in preamps and stuff, you're really giving the ability to the engineer to not double pre something.
Exactly. And and I'm a live player mostly. I do more live shows than I do recordings, but I don't use any of those fancy preamps live. I mean, granted, the desk that we have is a Digit Design Avid Venue console. It's got some nice pre's, but it's not an API or we don't use anything like that.
Of course.
And it sounds fine coming out of the PA.
Yeah.
So I see how if you're only doing studio recording and you want to bake it in and all that, I'm not opposed to that.
Sure.
It's just for what I do and in my experience, the less stuff you're sending those Kemper noises through, the more accurate it's going to be in recreating the amp.
Yeah, accuracy is an interesting concept, I think, with the Kemper, because we're kind of in the group, guitar players that are, maybe we're overly concerned with accuracy, you know what I mean?
Right.
And have you ever heard, I always tell people you never heard Jimi Hendrix's amp unless you stood in the room, right? You always heard it through a preamp, through mics, through a tape machine, through EQ.
Through a garden hose. You never know what they were, they were doing a lot of drugs back then.
Yeah.
There's no telling what they did to the guitar chain.
They were passing all sorts of stuff through garden hoses, guitar tone included.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing that we as guitar players kind of latch onto, like this idea of authenticity and stuff. But really it's like, well, is the sound of a 1964 Fender Twin the perfect sound for your record?
I don't know.
Probably not, though, right?
Probably not.
There's probably too much bass. There's
Oh,
probably like an engineer is never. When is an engineer not gonna? It's like a surgeon with a scalpel, right?
And I throw accuracy out the window as far as I'd rather, make the mistake of what sounds good to me, and that's why I use the same third power cab on most everything, just because
you dig the
I
speaker.
like that sound.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that cab and that speaker, and I can try other stuff, and I always think, I don't like it as much. And at the end of the day, my goal is to make sounds that I like, because the ones I really end up liking are seem to be the ones that do better for other people. It's like making a record. If you make a record that you love and you're in love with, that's more likely going to hit other people than if you try to make what they want.
Right. Yeah, and people probably don't buy records. How many Lone Star records do you think have been sold because of your guitar tone?
0.
Right. I mean, people enjoy music for the songs and for and things should serve the song. But I would agree with you. Now, I've used preamps on all the Tone Junkie stuff. I'm trying to think of anything I haven't, but I've bounced around a lot. And one of the things I realized was I don't make a fuss of what preamps I'm using. And sometimes people will tell me, because I'll say, I use APIs or I use these Neve clones. Everything's an API or a Neve clone anyway. There's other stuff, but people will be like, oh yeah, I can hear it. I can hear it on stuff, And I'm like, you cannot hear if I did this Marshall Plexi with a Neve clone or with an API. Now, those two pre's sound very different when they're right next to each other in the studio.
Right.
But isn't it weird that we use we go after transparency in overdrives. We go after these things. Like these are buzzwords for guitar players. But preamps are designed for their color.
Exactly.
We like the color.
Right.
You don't want, does anyone sell the world's most transparent mic pre for
Mackie.
guitar recording? Mackie, that's right.
They pride themselves on having the most transparent mic pre's.
Yeah.
High headroom, ultra transparent.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. Now, the speaker thing, you and I have talked about this. You're not a huge, I'm a big Greenback fan.
Yeah.
You're not a big Greenback guy.
Not a huge
No.
Greenback. To me, every amp that I run through a Greenback sounds like a Greenback. And it's all my personal experience. It's the same reason I hate Fender Twins. I hate Marshall 412 cabinets. Now, if I'm in a room with it, it's fine. But trying to mic those things is just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I like what I like and call that getting old. I've got a lot of gray hair. So over the years, I've just figured out what I like and what I don't like.
Right.
And I think everybody does that. If you've been playing, we've been on the road for 26 years, micing guitar cabinets every night. And I've had struggles where I just don't feel like I'm getting a good tone and all that. So I just try to eliminate bad variables and kind of go with what works. And everything builds on that.
How did you first discover the Kemper? Were you in that first crop guys at the first NAMM that had that first meeting?
No, I was not in that crop, but I was right after. I was doing an odd job for Line 6, and I was what they called a product specialist. And my job was to go around to Guitar Centers and Sam Ash. That was my only 2 gigs.
Yeah.
And they couldn't.
What were you doing? The Pod 2 or something?
No. This was right when they were coming out with their M20 mixer and their L2 speakers and all their PA stuff.
Yeah,
but I had a buddy that was part of this team, and he said, "Hey, you might be good for this because they don't need a lot of hours. They only have 2 stores for me to do at the time." And I thought, well, I can do that. 10, 20, 10, 15 hours a week.
Sure,
I can do it. Plus, just give me something to do.
Yeah.
And so my job was to go around and explain how the products work to sales guys that were maybe 18 years old and weren't familiar.
Guitar Center employees were
because Line 6 stuff is technology based, and if you don't know how to get around to show the customers how to work it, then you can't sell it. That was the goal. And then right after I got the gig, they switched over from guitar centered stuff to all this PA stuff, and it never took off. But so suddenly I'm a PA salesman at a Guitar Center, which wasn't really what I'd signed on to do. During that time, though, since they knew who I was and knew I had connections or whatever, and they knew I had all this demo gear, they said, "Hey, would you mind running a Variax guitar and something else? I forget. because they just came out with those James Tyler Variaxes.
Yeah, I
They'd
remember
just
those.
come
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
and that was one, and so I had the demo model of that. Can you run out to Wolf Hoffman's house from the band Accept, the heavy metal band? Andy Sneap is in. They're producing a record. They want to try to use it for something on the record. So I was like, yeah, I'll run it over there. Never met Wolf, super nice guy. So I go to Mount Juliet. For some reason, the guitar player for the German metal band Accept lives in Mount Juliet.
Well, because everybody lives just outside of Nashville, right?
Yeah, but it's so weird, and he's got this. This is totally apropos of nothing, but he has this huge standard poodle, cutest dog ever. So anyway,
I thought you were going to say like a 412 cab or something.
No. So
it's a poodle.
So I'm expecting metal, like
those guys are
rock and roll,
softies.
right?
They're always softies.
No, sir, I'm expecting rock and roll, and I go to the door, and there's this sweet little humongous poodle dog, and he's just like padding around the house, following me around, and so Wolf takes me down to the basement. I meet Andy Sneap, who at the time I didn't know I didn't know who he was. I grew up playing rock and country and stuff, and didn't know who he was. So met him, super nice guy. They were showing me what they were doing and stuff, and he said, "Have you seen this piece of gear?" Andy did. And he showed me the Kemper, and I just thought it looked like a really fancy spaceship toaster.
Right.
And he said, I said, "What is it?" And he explained it all, and he said, "Here's a track of Wolf's Marshall, and here's a track of the Kemper." And he soloed up each one. I was like, I can't tell the difference.
Right.
And so my brain just started spinning, because I was like, I'd worked with Jamie at Third Power for years, working on this one amp, this Third Power amp that I loved. And I thought, man, if I could recreate that in this little box, I could take that on the road for fly dates. I wouldn't have to be stuck with bad, beat-up Hot Rod DeVilles.
Right.
So that was what I thought when I was driving away from there. I was like, I need to check that out. So then I got online, started doing all the typical online research and everything. And I probably ended up buying it like 2 weeks later. Found one used somewhere and got it. And then we're on the road. I did my first profiling backstage in this backstage room in Ohio. And that was my first.
What amp?
It was at Third Power. I mean,
yeah.
my whole goal was just to try to get that.
Just that, yeah.
And so I profiled it and then tried just running my pedal board into the
Are those what's in pack one?
Some of them are, yeah. There's one.
Yeah.
I think one of the Blackface Cleans might be from that first thing.
Yeah, that first session.
And at the time, there was no rig manager editor.
Right.
So I didn't even know about all the amp tags and everything. So I still look at pack one. The tags were all wrong because I didn't know how to edit them at the time.
Because they bring them in. A lot of people don't know, because I've put out wrong tags before, but it imports the tags and the effects from whatever profile you were on in browse mode or in profile mode, maybe in performance mode.
Well,
but whatever it has pulled up,
Yeah.
when you jump over, it's always the Kemper always has a profile loaded.
Yeah.
Which is, even when you're updating or doing stuff, there's
Well,
always a sound.
in the manual, it said find a sound in the Kemper close to what you're gain-wise, close to what you're going to be profiling. So I'd use this, whatever. It had it was the Clapton Fender Twin or whatever. So there's still some tags from the Clapton Fender Twin in my first pack, because if they were hidden, in rig tags, which I never went into.
Yeah.
But now that it's on Rig Manager, I can see how dumb I was back then.
Yeah, those rig tags are really a pain. I'll tell you, there are so many things they could do to make profilers' lives easier with the Kemper. I know it's not a big market. There's there's eight of us or something. There's a bunch, but there aren't that many people that have pressed the button profile as many times as you or me, and there are certain things that just, like the keyboard is set up for a European keyboard. Do you ever use a keyboard in the back?
I have, but it's just a Windows keyboard. It won't work with Mac, but it'll work with a Windows keyboard.
But the keyboard, the S and the V, the Y and the X are switched.
I have not noticed that.
There's no way to. Apparently, you're not using any Ys.
I don't use it very
something.
often. No.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because it's a European keyboard.
Well, now that I do, I'll do it on Rig Manager after the fact now. So I'll take notes.
Yeah.
And I'm one of these guys. I've got steno books of all my profiling sessions.
I've seen pictures of you with the notebook.
And I've tried to do it on a computer, and it slows me down. So I can do it so much faster just writing it.
I know what you mean. My problem is I end up forgetting if I don't do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've even put packs out, and for the first couple hours there's no tags in there.
Yeah.
Or they're tags from a completely different amp,
Yeah.
It's a Fender Deluxe, and it says, Benson something.
Well, there's one or two profiles in my first pack. Honestly, I don't know what amp it is. It's either my third power on the Plexi side or it's my Fender or my 72 Marshall. But the tags are so ambiguous, and I don't have notes going back that far.
You didn't even put the name in?
Well, it says both in it. It says Marshall third power. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know which one it is. If it works, it works. I don't know.
Yeah, if it works, it works. So that's how you started. That's how you got bit by the Kemper bug.
It is, and so the whole point was to do fly dates with it, and then I started doing more profiling. I started doing it at home after that first weekend. I did some on the road. Then I went to my house and took over the living room and dining room, and I had cords running from the dining room to the living room. All my couch cushions were up covering the speaker because I lived in a pretty tight neighborhood where it was blasting, and then my buddies started bringing over their amps, and so my whole first pack was just my buddies' amps that they brought over.
Yeah, and
some of those profiles from that very first month, I still use to this day. One of them in particular, I've been on lately like crazy.
You were saying, was it
that LDW?
The guitar player for Phil Vassar's band, was it?
Yeah. So this is a good story. Jeff J Dog. Anyway, he's we've done shows with them over the years for so many times. But so I've known Jeff from Phil's band, and then we got to do a Christmas tour with him this December.
I saw you guys doing Carol of the Bells.
Yeah, it was fun.
YouTube.
That was a lot of fun.
Epic.
Got to do a Soldano, just ginger. We go into rehearsals, and both of our Kemper rigs are side by side, and he's starting to play, and I'm starting to play, and it's my normal sounds that I'm used to, and I'll be damned if his didn't sound better than mine. And I'm like, this is not cool. I know he's using profiles that I made because I gave them to him, years ago. He probably never went past pack one. I literally gave him pack one, and that was probably it. And all he did, being the great guitar player, but he's not just a techno nerd like I am. He just scrolled through, found one he liked, and has gone with it.
Sound forever.
And I'll be damned if it's not a darn good one. So he uses a couple pedals for gain in front of it, so it's his clean and his mid and all that, and then he's got one Bogner for high gain stuff. And so I started I'm going to not copy. I had that profile still on my rig, and so I just started throwing on my performances, and everything I threw it on sounded better. So it was just weird that this late in the game, after all these profiles, I'm still using one of my earliest ones, one that I kind of overlooked for years, and I learned something new every day.
Isn't it funny how you can go back and revisit like a profile like that, and it's great. I think it's somehow in the way, in that case, maybe it takes someone else to notice how great it is and what it's really great for. Whatever he's playing. What was he playing through guitar-wise?
He had a Tom Anderson Super Strat thing. HSS.
Right, so not far away from what you're
playing. Exactly.
But no, it's funny. It's funny. I'm always taken aback by two things. One, how people don't seem to realize that their gear totally is going to affect the way the Kemper sounds. Like if you play a different guitar, if you play a Tele and I'm playing a Les Paul on the demo, it's not going to sound like that.
Right.
And then two, how sometimes I make a profile or an amp that I'm not that crazy about. Like I'm like, this is a cool amp, but it's not going to be my main amp. And then it gets out there and people are like, this is life changing. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, well, like, what are you playing? But they're just playing other stuff. You know what I mean? Other things. And it fits for whatever that is. Right. It's really, some things I think take on a life of their own. When I first got the Kemper, I'll tell you the story how I first got the Kemper. I moved to Nashville and I thought, what am I going to see everywhere? I'm going to see Teles and, maybe some Voxes, but old Fenders and stuff. And if you go anywhere, if you go down Broadway and stuff, you will still see guys gigging vintage Princetons and Deluxes. Right. Because you turn them up, you get that sound. They're small, they're portable, and they're relatively affordable. You can get twins are super expensive, but a Deluxe you can get for $3 or under, And if it's beat up, even better. You're a player and you use it. But I couldn't believe that when I got here, the two most popular amps I saw were, no joke, Kempers and Hot Rod Deluxes. Now, Hot Rod Deluxes make sense. Right. Because they're cheap, they're everywhere. You can break them and replace them. They're usually, it's a backline amp or a house amp or whatever. Right. I expected that. I wasn't surprised at that. But I saw Kempers all over the place. Really? In people's studios and everything. I've talked to Christoph and them, and they say outside of Europe, they didn't tell me which cities, but they said the big ones, UK, Germany, Nashville.
That's funny.
They said of everywhere in the States, more of them go.
Well, there's so many studios in Nashville too, and it is such a great studio tool that you're kind of missing the boat if you don't have one, because it covers so much stuff.
It can cover literally everything.
Oh, I know.
I mean, it's I always joke that, like, if it can, like, it with all the packs out there, with everything I've released, everything you've released, it's a library.
It is
of tone. I've considered calling the Everything Pack, Tone Junkie. No, it's good. I've considered like rebranding it something like the library card or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, and I've had so many people tell me lately. I've noticed it's the producers who email and tell me like, "Wow, this changed my workflow." And a lot of times now that I've been in town for a while, it's not so much people emailing me who I don't know. It's people who I do know, who know that I make profiles, and then they start going, like, I've got two buddies who are like, this is incredible. Bands come into town, I record the bands, I work on their records, and they're like, I now have to spend time selling them that the Kemper is awesome because I want to use the Kemper, not whatever they brought. And by the end, they're like, wow, I got to get a Kemper.
Yeah.
Because it's changed their production workflow where they're not messing around, wasting all this time. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's incredible. I even see people doing Neve preamp profiles to run acoustics through and stuff. You did some acoustic ones, didn't you?
Yeah, but like acoustic preamp pedals and things. I've got a few that I even haven't released yet. But
yeah,
there's an Avalon off the Rig Exchange.
Yeah, Rig Exchange.
I got a clean Avalon preamp years ago, and that's what I use half the time now still. And then I literally had one of those ADA tube pre-boxes.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, they're $50 used.
Yeah.
And I profiled that, and that's my other acoustic one that I use. Just because it's basic, I've got all the EQ, compression, reverb.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a nice, warm, direct signal.
Yeah. So back to my story here. I discovered the Kemper because a guy brought a Kemper over to my house, like the Suze, who's on the channel with the beard and everything. The Suze brought a Kemper over and told me, I know a guy who did one of the first profiles that comes on the Kemper. And I was like, digital. And I legit, he told me that later, like that he had brought it up, and I didn't even remember him bringing it up. But I believe him. I trust him that he brought it up, but I couldn't even hear him. And then I show up at my church. I'm playing for the first time with this church on a Sunday morning. I show up, and I bring in my Sir Bella, and I bring in my Sir Strat, my Strifecta, the 3 Strymons, the whole thing, right? I've got gear the price of a car.
Right.
And the other guy who I'm going to play with that day, he starts playing. And I thought they started the stems. I thought the drummer had turned the stems on, and I was listening to like an intro because he was playing this really ambient, washed out kind of thing, swelling and stuff. And I went, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And my guitar sounded like an SM57. You know what I mean?
Right.
It sounded like it always did.
Because that's what they do on guitar amps. They throw a 57.
Everywhere you show up, there's a 57, unless...
And usually it's not positioned very properly.
No. It's thrown on in 3 seconds. And if you don't have a tech and stuff, if you're playing a Friday night or Sunday morning, whatever, and there's not someone on the road with you doing the same setup, then it's up to you to place a thing. And you can't listen. You got to run over there and do it, and then run back. And if the amps are in another room and have booth, and what, it's impossible. You know what I mean? To get like a consistent thing. I heard that and I went, "Oh my gosh, that's a Kemper. How does that sound so good?" So I ran home. I didn't even stay for church that day. No, I'm just kidding. So I go home and I called my buddy and I was like, "I got it. Bring your Kemper over here." We tried it and. It turns out he had, like the Chieftain we profiled is the same 96 Chieftain that's in the stock Kemper ones. And they did it when they came to Nashville for the very first NAMM before they had a little party, got people together and just asked people if they had amps to profile. And this guy, Mark, he lived next door to the guy's house they were at, and he had a Chieftain brought over and they did it. I mean, those profiles, I don't know. I think at the time the Kemper, they thought it was, we'll just throw a 57 into the Kemper straight. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't double mics. No one was really doing that sort of thing. But life changer, tone changer, like sold the moment you hear it. You know what I mean? like what you were saying about
just
Wolf's amp and
yeah,
the profiles.
I mean, you can't if you're listening to a mic'd amp, I don't think you can really tell the difference. And I was always really particular about what I would take on the road, and I had my own mics. I wouldn't trust house mics anywhere. I had my own mics, I had my own stands, I had baffles everywhere, and I had my cabinets marked so that every day they would almost be in the same place. But there's no way to make it perfect.
Yeah.
And so I was really particular, especially once everybody started moving to in-ear monitors. I think that was the biggest thing because, you're really hearing it right up against your eardrum.
Now,
and minor changes really make a huge difference.
Yeah. No, you're a junkie. I mean, we were just talking about, like, you're changing the magnets in your pickups.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
you're
at that level.
I'm a bit. What level is that? Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's
level 44.
Yeah, it's somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that's not just buy some more overdrive or something. That's like I really think A4s would do better in those magnets.
I swap diodes and pedals, and I mean, I'm just anything I can do to get that extra 2%, and maybe it's just all in my head, but it gives me something to do and it keeps my wife busy.
When are we going to get the? When are we going to get the signature Mbritt custom governor?
Oh, I don't know. I've got a box of boards.
I know. You told me one time, and I thought. Anyway, well, now there'll be a bunch of comments. Wait, what? What? The governor? What is it?
If you ever see any of my profiles that say red anywhere in the tags, that's my red pedal. That it was a happy accident. A buddy of mine owns Rocket Pedals. One of the owners of Rocket Pedals, and he used to have a side thing that they did where they sold kits. And we were over at his house one day, and he goes, "Hey, are you interested in building all this? Are you building a pedal?" And I said, "Sure," And so he hands me this box full of parts and boards and stuff, and a little map of what to put where. It's kind of like paint by number.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, at the very least, this will be a fun project for my young teenage son.
Sure.
Because he's into nerdy stuff. He's a really smart kid. So he helped me build it and put it through. He populated the board. I soldered it, put it all together, and I'll be darned if it didn't sound just awesome. I was like, that's a really good gain pedal. So I built another one. It didn't sound as good. So then I had to sit there and figure out
what did you do?
What did we do wrong? And there were just a couple caps in different spots, and so I just copied the first one, and now I've probably made 6 of them, and Tom Anderson's got one, Spanky that plays with Colt Ford's got one, Steve Mandel from Six Wires got one, my buddy Chris has one. I mean, there's probably 6 or 8 floating around, but I still love that pedal. Yeah. So you'll eventually get one, I'm sure. If I can ever build another one.
Well, I'm top of the list. Then on the top of
the
wait
you'll
list.
probably hate it, but
is that wait list longer than Analog Man's King of Tone?
It probably is actually. I don't even know if I have all the parts right now. I know at one point before the Kemper thing, I was actually going to start building those pedals, and just as a side hustle. But so I bought a stack of boards. I've got probably 1,000 boards for them.
You should. We just have to edit the story slightly to make it so that you found the correct diodes, but they were only still in a warehouse in like Yugoslavia that had been, half destroyed.
I had to fly over there and bribe the guy.
Yeah, and they had been stored in the cold.
Oh yeah,
for this many, and
keeps them fresh longer.
Crystallizing of the whatever. It's
I did find in the search for diodes. It's so weird when you start just. You've got this too. You have to have this. It's an ability to focus.
Yeah.
But you're focusing your ears, which is totally weird. Because most people just think of focus as eyes. But when you start trying to tell the differences between A and B, you start being able to hear those little weird things. And most people that don't do this don't hear those things. Engineers, mix engineers, they hear all that stuff. And it's just ear training.
And there's a way to focus, I think. It's funny you're saying this. There's a way, because I was recently experiencing this. I caught myself focusing on some high end, and I would describe it as like I'm focused. I'm hearing the whole thing. But same thing if you're focusing on a project that's in front of you or a picture, you can focus in on part of that painting, part of that picture.
Right.
In the same way, you focus in on the high end. You're trying to get this thing right or to be like this thing, and you're hearing the other frequencies, but they're not your concern.
They're out of focus.
Yeah, they're out of focus. I like that. They're out of focus, really. And you got to have that, I guess, to know the difference between A4 magnets and want to go.
But you can tell the difference. I mean,
yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, you had put you had put A4 magnets, was it right?
Yeah.
In your Sir S90s.
Correct.
And I have, what are the normal magnets that are in there?
I'm going to guess they're 5s just because Alnico 5 is the most common magnet for that.
Yeah, so, and I love those pickups. Everybody who is familiar with Tone Junkie knows I love that blue Sir that I play. It's actually the pickup that I really voice on my profiles around. I hate saying that because then people think like, oh, so what, it doesn't sound good with anything else? Like,
Right.
no, that's not how an amp works. You know,
Yeah.
like that's,
It's like it's just reference monitor. People can mix records on NS10s.
Yeah.
They don't always sound, that's not the best sounding speaker,
Yeah.
but you know what frequencies are going to be even on that speaker because you've heard them a million times.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what frequencies are in that pickup,
Right.
so you know how to work around it.
I know, like for me, I am very sensitive to like you sat kind of where I sit in my HW study there, but I sit in the same spot with the same cab facing me in the same orientation, and I on purpose haven't flipped the room around because I actually have at one point wanted to flip that whole room around, but I didn't because I was like, this is the spot I sit. I feel like I know what everything sounds like when I sit here with this guitar and listen through this thing. It's not the most scientific, but it's consistent. You know what I mean? Which is maybe the should be the tagline for the Kemper. It's not the most scientific, but it's consistent.
It is consistent.
I don't know. So the A4 magnets.
Yeah.
Mine are probably A5. Yours, I did stock ones. You have a S90 guitar with A4s.
Yeah.
What did we hear?
I feel like the A4s have a little softer top end. They have a little bit more low mid kind of thing, and they just compress a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
That's what I think I hear.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going for because I know what A5 magnets sound. I've had enough, Duncan 59s and different pickups. I know what they sound like.
Right.
And I've got Antiquities, which are A2s, humbuckers, and I know what those sound like. And then I got this Gibson that had A3s or A4s, and they do have a different tone. So I thought, well, they do sound very vintagey. So I wonder if I can make these sewer pickups sound more vintagey.
Yeah.
And it's really just working around a problem. My main guitar is that Tom Anderson that you played with A2 magnets. Red. Yeah, Red.
Yeah. You've got a pedal named Red and
it's a theme, I guess.
a guitar named Red.
Yeah, I don't know why. We painted the red pedal red just because I thought red would be a pretty color. We were at the craft store picking out paint, me and Ethan, so it turned red. But the red has A2 antiquity magnets, and they're degaussed and they're aged and all that stuff that they do for antiquity pickups.
Sure.
And I was wanting the sewer to sound a little bit more like that, but I didn't want it to be totally the same. So that's why I went with the A4s.
Yeah.
And I think they sound perfect in that guitar.
They sounded really good. I'm actually kind of jealous of that 3 P90 setup you've got going, especially on Red there.
Yeah.
Because you really had everything. We were just playing those guitars. And you have the neck middle bridge. I'm not sure who's playing middle in the world on a Strat, really. Somebody is occasionally, but
Jimmy Vaughn, I think he had the patent.
The patent. Am I wrong about that? Do people play the middle?
The only person I've ever really seen that I enjoyed listening to is Jimmy Vaughn. His middle pickup sounds amazing.
And it's like a brighter neck, I suppose. It's a neck, but less neck, but it's not a bridge.
Right.
It should be more useful. Maybe it is useful and we're all missing the boat and he's really onto something. But, well, he's Jimmy Vaughn, so you're going to like that or dislike that. I mean, he's very specific with his style of play. But you were able to get to the neck, and then you had the pull-up tone knob that lets you throw on the bridge.
Right.
So you had the traditional telly thing, neck and bridge.
Right, which I love on that guitar.
Right.
And I need to modify the sewer to get that.
Right. Yeah.
But there's so much going on in that sewer. And this was the problem I had. I wanted to make that sewer sound like my Anderson. I could have just bought Antiquities, but the way they have it all wired with their silent coil system, I took the back off and I was like, oh, that's a lot of work. What can I do that's not so much work?
Right.
And so I thought magnets. I've swapped magnets on P90s before. They're super easy. 6 screws. You loosen it, put them back. Way easier than humbuckers. So I thought I'll just buy magnets, and so I did, and it worked. And so, but now I've got to figure out how that switch in the Anderson's wired and try to copy that over to the pull pod make a pull pod for the sewer.
I definitely had some guitar envy playing both of those guitars.
They're nice ones.
They're nice guitars. They really are. You could treat them a bit nicer. They were a little dinged up.
That's not me.
It was
I
like
treat them very nice.
You You're
It's
dragging
my
things
darn
around.
tech. No, Rich does a great job. Sometimes stuff's just out of his control. But,
Right.
Yeah, the whole case of my guitars, 4 guitars, just fell 4 feet to the ground off a deck one time. Just recently. So that may be that big gash that we saw.
Yeah. Not to toot our collective horns here, but you, me, maybe Christoph, there could be a couple other people. These are pretty big titans of industry in the Kemper world.
In the very small little
In
corner of
very
the
small
world that
little
we
Kemper
are.
world, right? Christoph doesn't play guitar.
He does, actually.
Well, but he would not describe. He's a keys guy.
Yeah.
You know. So I'm not gonna. I don't think he's at our level of geekery when it comes to changing out.
If he created this thing, I mean,
Well,
he's
okay.
way beyond my level of geekery.
In terms of maybe his ability to hear,
Yeah.
But he's not switching out diodes and guitar pedals.
I would not put that past
Well,
him.
okay, maybe.
And even, I've seen Don Peterson's, who's another engineer at Kemper, and he builds fuzz pedals, and he's he's way beyond my geekery too.
So here's where I'm going with this. We both play P90s.
Yeah.
And we both really love
the most perfect pickup ever made.
Thank you for saying it, because I was just going to say, people all the time ask me questions about pickups, and I don't want to come across as play what I play or you're dumb.
Right.
But kind of. No, but I always go back because I love Strats. I mean, you have Tellys, you have Strats, traditional ones. Me too. I was showing you my Guild, my 1964 Guild Starfire.
Anti-hum pickups,
which were very neat. We love guitars. We love gear.
Yeah.
But P90s on our number ones.
Oh, yeah.
That's just what we go for because they're amazing.
They are.
And I try
it's a
to
single coil, so you don't have that deadness that some humbuckers get. Mm-hmm. It's got life in it, and it's big and bold, but it's still, I don't know. I love the pickups.
It's the snap. They have this snap that a single coil has. This open airiness.
Yep.
And then they have this low end that it can thump, but it's not compressed like a humbucker low end. Now that sound is great sometimes. Of course, like a great Les Paul sounds great. But you throw a P90 on the bridge, it can rock. You do a P90 on the neck, depending on the P90 of the guitar, it can sound like the fattest Strat you've ever heard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're getting. I told you, and this is almost verbatim what I said with your red guitar. I said the neck and the bridge, I wouldn't even pull out a Telly. Yeah. If I need a Telly sound and I want the Telly neck and bridge sound, this is like, you're not going to be able to hear this isn't a Telly on a record or something.
Right.
They're just, why aren't more people playing P90s?
I have no idea. You know why? Because they're noisy. They're big and they're noisy.
Not the ones you and I play, right? Does the Tom
we
Anderson
have worked around it.
Yeah, we worked around it.
Yeah, you've got the sewer silent coil system in that. Does it have the dummy coil in the? Have you opened the back?
I haven't opened it.
Okay, because my carved top sewer's got the dummy coil where it's literally like a plastic bobbin with wire around it, just no magnets or anything like that. So theirs is that one's active, so it needs a battery to work.
Mine's active, yeah.
And then when the battery dies, it's just not hum canceling.
The P90 ones, from what I understand, they have to make them active because it needs to be stronger to cancel the P90 level of hum. Whereas the other ones can be passive, I think.
Well, I think it's just a newer technology. It's just, I don't know.
Because the Classic Pros still don't come with, but they're silent. And they don't come with a battery. But all the JMs come with a battery.
I thought it was just a newer thing, but it may be.
Maybe the new Classic. I'd have to look.
Maybe also just a size and space thing. It takes more space for the battery. And
Right.
The original sewers, I believe, the dummy coil design's been around for a while, but there's a guy in California named Helix. And so I've got Illich back plates. They make Strat back plates, cover the springs, or they make pick guards. My exotic Telly's got the Illich pick guard, and my Strats and Red have the Illich back plate.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit extra work to get it all in there, but it does still sound like the same pickups, but it's noise free, which is super cool. So now I was not a Strat guy forever. They're noisy, and every stacked or side-by-side humbucker Strat pickup stopped sounding like a Strat. So I just kind of gave up on Strats for a while.
Yeah.
And then I found this really kind of Texas hot antiquity set, and they hang with my P90 guitars. So now I don't have to readjust all my EQs and stuff for that Strat.
Yeah.
And so now I've got 2 of those.
Speaking of EQs, are you ever using the output EQ on your Kemper?
Not for main outs to front house. I don't touch it.
Yeah,
because I'll bug our sound guys to no end. They get tired of hearing how was the guitar, tonight.
Right.
But if they ever hear anything, and I'll ask them, I said, if you're taking 400 out every day, let me know.
Yeah,
I'll fix it on my end.
Yeah.
But I will use it on monitor cab out, the EQ, the 4-band EQ.
Because that's going into the Zytone?
Either Zytone or a guitar cabinet, or if I'm at home, I've been using that QSC K10. I'll just roll it, especially if it's pointed at my head. I'm really averse to high end hitting my ears from a horn.
Right.
So I've gone to great lengths to try to, like on my CLR, I've taken a piece of guitar pickup box foam, shoved it in the throat of the horn, just so it's a little less high endy.
Sure.
And so same thing. I'll roll highs and presents out if it's pointed up.
Somebody recently, Stu G, who I was talking to you about earlier, he told me, we made some profiles. His guitar tech came and said, whatever you did, don't touch it. It's perfect. I'm not touching your channel at all. That's the goal, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right, because it's like we used to have tubes, and we used to have which, by the way, tubes don't even make the sound, but we'll get into that in another podcast. This is what I'm going to do, because I don't know if I'll ever be able to get Christoph at the house here. I think next NAMM, I'm going to set up a booth at NAMM, and I'm going to do podcasts from the booth.
Oh, that'd be
I'm
good.
just going to grab people and go, just come do a podcast with me. But I heard Christoph, I actually think I have the audio of it, give a great explanation on why tubes don't make the sound of an amp anyway. Which makes so much sense, because all our amps use the same tubes, but they don't sound the same.
Right.
Why did I get into this? Because we're limited there. We're not going to pull out, a scope and a solder gun and start changing things. If it's too much 50 hertz, let me just add something to take that out. But we have the ability now to add an EQ in front of our guitar, or between the guitar and the amp, between the amp and the cab, between the cab and the output. We can do that stuff that they're doing.
Right.
And if we get it dialed in, it should make wherever we go. Because we don't always have a sound guy, right, who's doing the same show with us show after show, right? Unless you're on a tour or something. Or,
yeah. Well, we're spoiled just because we tend to keep one. But
right. You're a pro.
Well,
I told you.
The band is a pro.
I'm
along for the ride.
I told you, too, you were a pro, because on the back of your guitars, there was a little a print with a name on the back of the headstock.
Yeah.
And I said, this is when you know there's a pro guitar player. When you really, because of the utility of it, you have to name your guitars so that you can refer to them quickly.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And it's best if they're one syllable.
Right.
Yeah.
I got it.
Give me red. Give me
Right.
Strat.
Right.
If
you're saying Goldie's too long.
Well, 2's probably the limit.
2, yeah. I have another guitar named Bartholomew. You don't think that's gonna?
I named one Ramses, but it's never taken off. And I got it from Nacho Libre. Ramses is the greatest. Ramses.
Yeah.
So Ramses, because that was my number one hollow T that I do all profiling with, so it became Ramses.
Right.
But it's still too long, and it's not an easy name to yell across stage and bring me Ramses.
Right.
Plus, people look at you like you're really weird.
Right. Super weird.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got some questions here. You wanna?
Let's do it.
Let's touch some of these questions. Let's see. Now I should really read these questions before I read them out loud to see, but I did not do that. Okay, so we talked about this one. I'd love to know if Michael personally sees other people using Kemper around town. How are they utilizing the Kemper? Is it viewed as being legit by most producers, or are tube amps still king in the studio setting, kind of in our world of Nashville or wherever, however you answer, in your experience?
I feel like if you're making mastered albums, engineers are always going to want to see tubes, and the guitar players are going to want to play through tube amps.
Right. Is that an issue of education or quality?
I think it's a perceived quality. But at the same time, some of these, the big A session guys, I don't want to say they don't need the Kemper, but they've got the primo examples of some of these amps. Plus,
And they have cartage.
Yeah, they got cartage. They got budgets.
which is code for somebody else carries this stuff in for me, right?
Exactly.
This is
Yeah, they just show up and 14 heads and 6 cabinets are already lined up and plugged in. So,
And I've always gone into this thing because this is someone said this to me. I'm gonna name drop him here. It's the guy who makes TMG guitars. His name is Jonathan. Great guy. I wouldn't name drop him if I was going to say anything negative. He makes great guitars. I think they go around and on their like touring setup where they go to different trade shows and stuff. They've got a real Showman that's modified by Howard Dumble. They've got a couple vintage amps in there. And they're selling really expensive guitars. TMG guitars?
I've seen them, yeah.
So they're selling really expensive stuff. I mean, their hollow bodies are like $6,000. Their bolt-on Strats are almost $3,000, if they're not $3,000. All handmade, no expense. He makes great stuff. He's got these vintage amps. And he said to me, he's like, I don't know. I just can't see the edge playing a Kemper.
Yeah.
And he's like, and wouldn't you be a little disappointed if you showed up and he was playing a Kemper? And I thought to myself, one, I'm gonna liken the edge to my mother here for a minute. My mom, and I think everybody, you reach an age where it's hard to adopt new things.
Yeah.
Right? My mom is really comfortable with her Hotmail account, right? And I can't get her to switch to Gmail. And I don't know what happened in between her getting on Hotmail and trying to go to Gmail, but something clicked where it's like she doesn't want to try new things with her email anymore. The Edge doesn't have.
I still have an AOL mail address, only because everybody knows
it's
that
okay.
one. So.
That is.
Yeah.
I know. I see.
Yeah.
But the Edge doesn't need to adopt a new technology. He's not carting in 9 AC30s.
Right.
But I think his rig is something like 6 AC30s or 4 AC30s and 2 5E3s.
Yeah.
He's switching some on and off and everything.
Well, and all of his effects are preamp. There's nothing in effects loops
Right.
anywhere. I mean, all those weird, crazy sounds are all just hitting the front end of a clean-ish to overdriven amp.
He's at the level where people watch his rig rundown on Premier Guitar, and they're not even disappointed that he's not in it. Because it's just assumed it's the Edge.
Right. It's like Brian May's rig.
Tech,
or
yeah. The tech is going to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, we want to hear the tech. It's not, I mean, I'm always disappointed if an artist isn't in those videos, but I'm not disappointed if he's in, because it's so elaborate. That guy's full-time job is making sure. So, yeah, is it...
But going back to the original question, in the studio, I think when producers, and I could be wrong, I don't do a lot of recording anymore. We make a record every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But the engineers that I've worked with, one of them will even call me and say, "Hey guys, bring in a Kemper. Can you come down and consult just to make sure he's got the right sounds we need for whatever project?" I don't think they cringe when they see a Kemper,
right?
Like they would a Line 6 piece of gear. Nothing against Line 6. It's just Kemper to me has that little cool factor that some of these other brands don't have.
Yeah. I think, too, that's one of the reasons. This is off topic a little bit, but that is Line 6 points their stuff. People get mad at me when I say this, but from a marketing perspective, they're selling to bedroom players.
Right.
They're coming out with a lot of bedroom solutions. They're coming out with a lot of Sunday morning solutions. Line 6's target market is not professional producers who make their living making albums.
Right.
Now, that's not to say, in my opinion, you can't get tone that's indistinguishable in a mix.
Right.
I know you feel that way. I feel that. To me, the feel's a little different. There's some differences there. To me, I don't know whoever, Robert Line 6 or whoever owns the company, Mr. 6. I mean, his nephew must be the guy in charge of making presets, because I can't understand how that guy hasn't been fired now, because Line 6 has been releasing bad presets preloaded on these units since the original pod. Yeah,
I don't know how they do all that stuff.
And it's so crazy to me, because it seems like whenever it comes out, players make it sound way better than it did out of the box. Like, why don't you just get players to do that up front and then? Well,
in their defense, all of these modelers, an amp is a closed system. You've got an amp, a speaker, and everything's in one box. The Kempers and the Line 6 Helix, all those units are not closed systems. They're totally dependent on what headphones you're playing through, what speaker cabinet you're going through, what room you're in, what guitar you're playing. It's very dependent on all that.
Yeah.
And it is hard for you or I even to create a Kemper profile that sounds great on every speaker that it gets played through.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
And I've played, I made some profiles for Wolf of his Marshall or EVH head. And they sounded great in the room where we were profiling, and whatever cabinet when we were listening to it. He gets back home to his studio and they're dark as hell. It's like, holy crap.
I've had that happen.
And so it's just, there's just so much variety in the speaker. The monitoring system is...
In the room. Rooms can be bright.
Absolutely.
They can be alive. They can be... There's probably like echo on these mics a little bit. Like you can tell we're in a small room with this, hey, this is, it's worth what you paid for
budget.
it. It's worth what you paid for it, okay? But short answer to the question, producers don't cringe when you see the Kemper. I see them in a lot of studios.
I don't think they cringe, and especially demo sessions and stuff.
They're all over
money,
the place.
They don't have to pay for cartage now. They get all these amps.
Yeah, HW is not hanging out in top level studios these days, or any of the days in his past. But I feel like I have sold people on getting Kempers, and they've all been players or demo guys. And even writers and stuff. I mean, or people who play live. Mm-hmm. I've noticed everybody at my church is completely on Kemper now. And even the producers who go there, who I just talk gear to, they've adopted Kempers.
Right.
Stu G, I know we talk about him a lot on his channel. He's been on the channel a bunch, and he'll be coming on the podcast. He's a great example of a guy who has taken a 412 and his vintage park and everything around, did the stadium thing for years and years, and it was on. We got 4 dates in Europe. What are we going to do?
Right.
Played the Kemper, and then now for him it's like, well, I'm going to bring the Kemper on this leg because it's shorter, and I'm going to bring the Kemper on this Christmas tour because it's shorter. But I still like having amps on stage. You know what I mean? That's a feel nobody's trying to copy.
Right.
If you're straight into in-ears, I think it's great. Would Mbritt recommend tweaking profiles per guitar? What's the best approach after the definition control? Someone said, I second this. I find myself tweaking profiles because my humbuckers are hot and dark, and I usually can get something I'm happy with, but tips would be great. How do you adjust? You've got many different guitars. How do you adjust profiles? And we've had this conversation, so
I do it on the front end typically. Mm-hmm. You won't find a really hot humbucker in my house. And I just tend to gravitate towards pickups that are in that middle range, around the P90 range, because it's my favorite.
Right.
So my Strat pickups are hotter, my Tele pickups are a little hotter than normal vintage, and my humbuckers are a little on the weaker side. So they kind of stay. Now, if I was having to tweak, definitely just first thing I do is turn the definition up for a dark humbucker, and then go to that treble and presence knob and turn those up.
Yeah.
There's also those cab parameters. If you're dialing it in for certain things, if there's way too much low end, take the low shift up. Just you don't even have to go much at all.
It's sensitive.
Point
it's
two,
very sensitive, yeah.
Is usually plenty. And that's about it. Now Strats, definitely definition lower because they're bright, and because what happens when you're turning the definition down, you're not only turning highs down, it's basically a balance. It's like a scale.
Right. Mm-hmm. You can add in the lows and the mid-range by reducing it. Yeah.
Right. So it's like if you just picture a seesaw, as 5 is pretty much there, it starts doing this on both sides. So.
And those adjustments, I find there's adjustments that you're making with the definition control where it doesn't seem like it gets much brighter, but definitely there's stuff coming out.
Right.
When you get to high.
Oh yeah, you start lowering that low end.
You really start to dump that stuff.
And I believe most of that, and I could be totally wrong, but I believe one of the Kemper guys said that it has to do with the amount of low end hitting the gain. And if you'll notice, most of these high gain amps that are have definition super high, they have filtering built into the amp, because I don't know if you've ever heard low end going into a circuit that's distorting, but it's really not pleasant.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these amps, Klon pedals do it. They filter out low end. They put a high pass filter and filter out low end before the gain stage.
Yeah.
And that's what that definition control is actually reading. And so these, like some matchlesses that keep all those frequencies hitting.
That, Michael, you have just made a light bulb go off for me.
Yeah.
This is why whenever I turn on a clone, the definition goes way up.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I don't perceive it as much brighter.
Right.
Because it's dumping the bass before the gain stage, so there's not as much bass to get to the Kemper.
Correct. And if you listen to like Matchless Lightning, you'll get one definitions because it's sending all those frequencies into the gain stage.
This has officially just become the best Kemper knowledge resource of any podcast before. we've talked about this. I do the same thing. To me, it's number one, definition control.
Yeah.
If you want to flirt with some of the other parameters in there, you want to add some compression, but that's not really EQ stuff. Just,
Right.
But for me, it's definition control. It's that EQ on the front.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's cab parameters. And usually I don't even need to get to 3. I find it's just
very
definition
seldom.
control, and then maybe I'll add a little bit. And
if you have to do more than that, usually switch profiles.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
And you and me have talked about this. I feel like people are way too sensitive to the EQ controls on the Kemper if they don't read straight up. And I think the mid-range control, rolling it up, sounds really good.
Oh, yeah.
I think like when I want more mid-range, I roll it up and boom, it's like that's what I wanted to hear.
On all my solo sounds live and my Marshall type solos, I'll goose that mid range on there just because it, like you said, those EQ knobs are perfectly voiced to me. And people complain that the Kemper isn't like using a real amp, but I so take this over a real amp any day of the week because there's so much going on Fender amps and stuff. If you're turning one thing up, you're actually turning something else down. It's just you're chasing your tail half the time. You're losing what you liked and to get something else.
But people get used to that, I think.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this before. I think there's a thing of it's difficult to learn. The learning curve of the Kemper is there, not because it's a steeper learning curve than amps are, but we all went through the learning curve of amps, and no one ever called it a learning curve or said this is hard to do. It's just a given that if I have a bright switch, it does this. If I take out on a Vox, there's no mids, but it has a lot of mids. How do I control the mids?
Right.
You know what I mean? How do
It's because they're all interactive. The bass, turn the bass and treble down, you get mids.
And it's just understood that, well, you have to learn how to use this amp. And then you see the Kemper, and there's these things we've never seen before, definition control.
Right.
I've always maintained that, like, you and I don't know what a bright switch sounds like because somebody listened to a podcast and heard me describe for an hour what a bright switch sounds like, even though I've done that, right?
Right. We
know because you flick it, you do. Now then, that experience informs when I talk about it for an hour.
Right.
Now you have something to go back and reference. You know those words that I'm saying, I'm describing it have more meaning because you've experienced the bright switch going on. I think the problem is when people sit down and they see definition, they've got no context for what that is.
Right.
But once you become familiar, I know what it's going to sound like when you up the definition control. You know what it's going to sound like. I know what it's going to sound like when I up the presence and treble.
Clarity.
Yeah, the clarity. You're at.
I love the clarity knob.
I know what it's going to feel like when I add the compression in that section.
Right.
The clarity for a minute. Now I've asked Christoph what it does, and he gave me a very German response, which is, "Well, I can't tell you." So what he did hint at me one time. I said, "What is it doing?" It's the high end, and he said, "Well, it's actually maybe in the highs and the mids, but I don't want anyone to copy what we're doing."
Right.
They're achieving something by doing something else.
It's the way that I believe, and I could be wrong. I believe it's because they have the clean sensitivity and distortion sensitivity. They're not blending in. The direct mix is already blending in a clean, dry sound, so it's not the same as that. I believe it has to do with they are somehow untying the clean and distorted parts of the signal, and they're able to push more of the cleaner signal to it. And it does tend to sum up and give you more mid-range to me when I hear it.
Yeah, when you roll it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hear a little bit more mid-range. It's a little cleaner, but it's not direct signal. It's still that amp tone, but it's a little less fuzzy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's clear.
It is clarity.
It's like adding.
It's brilliant.
Clarity.
I love that knob.
So okay, that was.
And on the EQ knobs on the front, if I take a flat sound or profile that I've made and it's totally straight up in the middle, if I take each one and turn to the right to where one light's on, to me it sounds cooler. And I don't know. I mean, it's very scientific. Very scientific. If you up 1 to 1.5 lights, it just sounds better.
Yeah.
And I don't know if louder is just always better or what it is. There's something in those EQ points that they've chosen they're very good. Right. I mean, they did a good job on that.
Yeah, and I noticed too, like the bass doesn't take out always all the lowest bass, and so what that means is though, that used to frustrate me because I'd be like, well, there's too much like thump, real low end in here. It's too bellowy. Maybe it's 100 or 50 or whatever, and it used to bother me that I can't take it out. But what it also means is when you go the other way, you're not adding the bad stuff in.
You can go all the way up, and it's still not a bad tone.
Yeah.
And you can now that you know where low shift is, you can take that super low stuff out.
Right. And yeah, that is that. And how magic are those two controls? Can you imagine having that on
I
a
want an
tube
amp.
amp?
I want a real amp, tube amp with definition. I don't know why. And the thing that Kemper got right is fixing these things. Your EQ knobs are independent. They're not, if you turn the bass up, you're not losing treble.
Yeah.
The gain knob is independent of volume.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest pet peeve with every other modeling device. You're turning stuff into ones and zeros. Fix problems.
Yeah.
Like Kemper did.
Right.
Not we keeping all these problems of a tube amp and just shoving them into numbers and parameters. I hate when I'm on the Helix, for instance. And I love the Helix for what it is. Turn up the gain, you got to immediately go to the master or channel volume and turn it down.
Yeah.
Just to try to keep in the same gain range.
You've been using the Helix live lately.
I did a couple shows with it just to test because
Yeah.
I do these presets at home, listen to my earbuds or whatever, and I think these are pretty good. And then I have to test them live in situation just to see if they're any good.
Yeah.
And the 2 shows I did with them, there were some sounds I thought, man, this sounds just as good as the Kemper. And then there was others that I was like, it's a little thin. But that's just learning. If I had to use the Helix all the time, I would get it dialed in probably about 2 months, which is what it took me to get the Kemper dialed in.
I just did, I played live with the HX Stomp, and it went pretty well, but same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds good.
Feels not the same.
Yeah, no, it's not. So the way, though, I was getting, for me, what I'm liking about the HX Stomp is it's allowing me to use some of my favorite pedals again.
Oh, yeah.
Like a Cali 76. So I love that compressor. And then use a King of Tone again, which is, I'm usually playing profiles of a King of Tone through a Vox AC30, which is my rig for a long time. And then now I play through the Kemper. So now I'm using the real King of Tone through the HX Stomp. I think you're a fan of the stuff. You've made stuff for the Helix. You're a fan of the Helix. I'm a fan of the stuff too, but I bleed green.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's a thing that changed.
If someone said, which would you rather use, I know the Kemper better, and it solves, my whole thing is just solve problems.
Yeah.
That the Kemper solved problems of consistency. Mics moving, tubes going bad, tubes breaking, fuses blowing, all the problems I had with tube amps. And also, if I wanted to run stereo and have mic blends, now I'm up to 3-4 channels on a console.
Totally.
Sound guy doesn't want that. And then those blends would change daily just by millimeters of mics moving.
Yeah.
So the Kemper solves problems. Now, there's problems with the Helix that I think the Kemper still beats it at. The smart harmony, I can set user scales in the Kemper, which for 2 songs that I need the harmonies on.
That is a big one. Line 6 should add that in.
I mean, it was on some of their older devices. You could create your own user scales, but it didn't make it to this.
That seems just like an oversight.
Yeah.
That really does seem like an oversight. But those are the types of things where if the community doesn't talk about it, they can get forgotten. Right. And then, hopefully, because I know Line 6.
And just the fighting gain stage or gain structure,
Yeah.
I know that if my master volume on my Kempers right up in the middle, they're all going to be roughly in the same vein.
Right.
Maybe a little bit here and there in the amp volume, but that's about it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're actually, you want more problem solved, where I think a lot of people get upset when their modeler acts too different than a tube amp.
And I love tube amps, but when I sit in the room with them, I hear that, I don't want to say flaws because they're not flaws.
No, but of course.
But they're things I would fix if I could.
They're not finely tuned machines.
No,
they're not.
They're hot rods, most of them. The good ones anyway.
Yeah. I liken it to I feel like the Kemper is, I'm playing a Tesla. You know what I mean? Like, this is much more refined. What I'm able to do with it. Right. I can still crash into a pole or something. Well, maybe the Teslas, you can't do that. Yeah. You can still drive bad, I guess. Yeah. You can still go too slow. I don't know. The cars drive themselves, so maybe not. But the capability is so much better. Whereas, I view the tube amp is like the internal combustion engine. It's like a Corvette. All this, I heard on Top Gear them say about Corvettes, only Americans could turn an engine this powerful and so little horsepower. There's that sort of thing. There's an inefficiency about tube amps where it's like, to get my tone, it has to be way too loud.
That's my
for
biggest
any
problem.
Environment. I think the biggest problem that needs to be said is people live in spaces. Like right now, you can probably hear the reverb on the walls and the bounce back, right? I'm going to get that fixed. But we live in these spaces, right? We're in my house. We're in a room that I had that I was like, I'm going to make this a podcast. But this is where we live, and our amps are probably going to be in those spaces.
Right.
If you don't consider where people are, and if you don't consider what volume is not painful when you're designing a piece of audio equipment, in any other sort of world other than guitar, we would say that's a bad piece of equipment, right? I mean, we would say this is not suitable. It only sounds
good. It sounds really good, but it's blowing the walls down.
Could you imagine if someone said, I made the best sounding studio monitors ever, but you can only run them at 125 decibels all the time?
Right.
No one would use them.
Right.
And
just in the real world, a lot of people are using in-ear monitors.
Of course.
Churches.
Yeah.
Nobody wants live stage volume. If you go to Broadway, they're trying to stick guitar players on Helixes and things like that because they don't want to have to fight a guitar amp to get the vocal over the PA. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
there's something a little bit wrong about that. And I'm a Kemper guy through and through, but
well, I mean,
Broadway.
Whatever, the Boss Katanas, whatever they want just to lower the volume. And that's been the trend for the last 15 years for sure. I remember when we first started touring, none of that stuff was out. I had 3 amps going at the same time. I had a Marshall, a Fender, and a Vox running together. It was glorious.
Right.
I look back now and think, why
did
anyone let me do that? It was so had to be loud.
Okay. Let's see. One topic. We've talked about cabs, EQs for studio work.
Yeah, somebody mentioned you use one cab and I use another cab, and why do we do that? And I mean, I do it just like I said, I've done it for so long. I've owned so many cabs, and this is what I consider the best sounding, most. I don't want to say flat. It's not flat. It's just the best sounding cab. I can run any amp into that cab, and it still sounds like the amp.
It's
the third power.
But the Celestians that are.
Oh yeah, I use the Classic Lead 80.
The Classic Lead 80.
And I don't know why, because for years I used vintage 30s, and I thought that was the be all end all speaker. And then I had a Mesa Lone Star, no relation, and I had the 90 watt Celestion in it, right? But that I could run it clean, and I could hit that low E string, and I always want my low E string to sound like a piano, not like a thud. Yeah. And
we talked about this is why you lock your bridge down.
Yeah,
Not lock it down, but it's touching the body.
Oh yeah, it's pretty tight. You can't do your soft.
I was having a hard time getting it to move at all with my girlish touch.
But yeah, I want my low string, and so I would play through that Lone Star at home, and it just had that ring because that 80 watt speaker just could keep up and hold together. And so I thought, well, if I like that speaker, I'm going to try a Classic Lead 80. It's the closest thing Celestion has to that, just in the market. So I did, and ever since then, I just have been a huge fan of that speaker.
Yeah.
And then I didn't realize when they added the Lone Star models to the Helix, or the Shiva, I don't know, it was one of the Shiva, it's the Shiva cab, but I finally found it. Didn't find it for the first year I had the Helix.
It's that speaker.
But there's a Classic Lead 80
right.
thing, and after I found that, I was like, well, I don't need to use my own IRs if I've got the ability to use that with a couple mics on it. So when I did these last 2 shows with the Helix, I used the stock cab with the 112 Classic Lead.
Yeah, for the profiles, but when you have a combo amp, you usually use a speaker that's in there.
It depends. Like if it's
because you have.
I have.
Like yeah.
Typically, I'll make profiles with my third power, and then if I have time and if it's a unique enough sound, I'll do the combo cab too.
Yeah. Because like with your Vox pack,
you can't not.
You have to. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
You just can't not.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
You have. It's like I actually kind of prefer Voxes with greenbacks, but
it's because you've had one and your ears you just think that's what it's supposed to sound like.
Right. But.
And I've had that same amp.
But what we were playing in the room there, that was a Vox with I put the little X on it because that's what Vox does for the blues. That was with blues. Those profiles, and I love that sound.
Right.
I just for me live.
Now greenbacks through a Vox, like I had that same TB6 or whatever.
Yeah.
Those sounded good. Those are greenbacks didn't sound like greenbacks for some reason, but
it might be the comment,
but Marshall cabinets, they just sound very dull and.
Always in Marshall, is it always in the 412s?
Usually, yeah. But I've had them in my third power 212. I've put, the greenbacks in
And you
that.
feel like, you don't like. So I use these Scumbag M75s, and it's most like a creamback. It has the power handling of a creamback, and it's really Scumbag's version of a creamback. And I believe these were made before. Mine were made before. Before I think the creamback was reissued, because that was, when did the creamback come back?
3 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, they didn't have it out for a long time, and
4, maybe longer.
and now they've got those Alnico creambacks, which I want to try.
Yeah, I haven't
I've
tried
heard they're
one
really
yet.
nice.
I've got golds, but
Were you telling me someone said the Alnico creamback was their favorite speaker? Somebody was just telling me.
I don't think it was me.
Yeah,
I have a love-hate relationship with golds. Sometimes, like one day, I will think, this is the best sounding speaker ever. 2 days later, it's like, God, I cannot stand this thing. It's got this thing that I can't get rid of. So I like them and hate them both at the same time.
I think that's the Alnico quality, and that's one thing I noticed. I should really silence my phone before we do this. That's one thing I noticed about the Helix stuff is if I pull up a blue, well, it's this blue cab. Whereas, like, I feel like I've encountered different cabs that sound different that both have blues in them.
Right.
And I haven't really experienced that I'm able to get the full sort of breadth of what those things can sound like. You know what I mean?
Right.
To me, it's a package thing. Like a cab sounds good or a cab doesn't.
To me, they over accentuate what the differences are.
Yeah.
I mean, like it sounds super voxy to such a point where you don't know. It would only sound good if you're playing Holly's covers, or something like that.
Right.
I never can, or if you're playing Bird's songs, I just can never
Right.
get something that sounds kind of usable across the spectrum.
Somebody wants to know, what is your favorite FR? And this is a little bit of an easy question. I mean, you play your FR.
I do.
Your Zytone, Mbritt, signature.
And I had it made kind of to do what I wanted it to do. So
Right.
that's the one I've been using. Is it perfect? I mean, Mick would hate me if I said, no, it's not perfect. But, I mean, we're still looking at other speakers for it. The Celestion coaxial is going to be coming out. We're going to try that. So we're always looking to try to make it even better. But so far, that's my favorite one that we've done.
Right.
Or that I've tried.
Okay, you and I both know Christoph and the guys at Kemper. Let's set the record straight.
Oh, no.
Because they have this reputation, and I don't think it's accurate, and I don't think you think it's accurate.
Okay.
Where I think because of this one online video, it's been said that their attitude is they've created the greatest piece of gear ever, and they never need to update it because it's already the greatest, and you should all just accept that it's the greatest, and we never need to do anything to it again, and that's why we're not doing all the things you want.
Attitude.
Is that their opinion as you've heard it from them?
I've heard similar things, but I don't think it's meant in that kind of a really assholey way. Can I say that?
It's made.
I mean, they're very proud of their gear, and the fact that it has not had to. They haven't made a Kemper 2 yet, and that's testament to the fact that they overbuilt it in the beginning, and however he did his algorithms to make it work.
We just got new reverbs that sound to me as good as the Ventress, the Big Sky, and we didn't have to buy a DSP card to add into the Kemper.
Didn't have to pay for them.
I'll tell you my take on this, and you introduced me to them the first time, and I pretty much just hung around their booth all NAMM 6 months ago and wouldn't leave them alone, and probably asked them every question I could think of. And I my impression from none of those guys was ever that they're like.
I mean, I've heard them say
we made
things.
the perfect thing.
I mean, they've said pretty much why.
Right.
Why do we need to come out with something new?
Why do we need to come out with something new? Because it's not antiquated yet.
And
but it's not.
And they're
it's
still
not,
adding features.
Yeah, they're still supporting. They're still adding features. But it hasn't been. I guess that's my thing that I notice is, it's been said. I feel like it's almost been said that like they feel it's perfect and now they're just not going to do anything to it and leave it alone. Right. But it's like if that were true, they wouldn't come out with delays.
Right.
They wouldn't come out with reverbs.
Right. No.
They wouldn't come out. You know what I mean?
I think they overbuilt it. I mean, they had when they first came out, they had a whole processor that was not even being used yet, and they thought ahead enough to do that. I mean, that's.
And I can't help but notice, I can't help but notice. I mean, they're still supporting it. they appear, from what they've told me, to be a company that's still selling a heck of a lot of Kempers.
Mm-hmm. I would assume.
If anything, from what I heard with them, was the challenges with keeping up with demand.
Yeah.
So if people are still being converted and you're going forward, and your challenges are how do we keep up with the growing demand, why would you? It's weird to me that it seems like people want them to do the Axe Effects thing, which is we're done, we're stopping support, there's a new unit, yours is antiquated.
Well, that's the beauty of people like us, is that we're creating new content for the Kemper all the time. It's the same box. People can still get it. People that have had it for 3 years get new stuff. I mean, you have to wait for Fractal to add new amp models. You have to wait for Line 6 to add new amp models. You can just go get new amp models with the Kemper. I think just by design, it's made for more longevity. Longevity, which camp are you in as regarding the editor? Is it necessary, or is it just would be nice if you had it, or it's a piece of crap because it doesn't have an editor?
I fall in this camp where I go, if you want an editor, I think it would be cool to have an editor. Now, there is ToastMe. There is the third-party editor. And people get mad at me whenever I say there's no editor. And they're like, there is an editor, and it's this and that. And people have even said they're just waiting for ToastMe to do all the work. And then they're going to stay. It's like, this isn't rocket science. It's MIDI over USB cable. The guy made the Kemper and keyboards. They can make an editor if they want. I think for them, one of the things I notice is maybe they feel like it's not in their target market's real desire to have an editor, and so it hasn't been very important. I'd love to see an editor, but when I hear people attach onto the editor things like, why can't I use it as an interface? I think, like, if you're trying to use the Kemper as your audio interface, that's just not what it's designed for.
Right.
Or I hear people say, well, can it be a load box also? Just things that really are outside of what it should be. So I'm of the opinion I'd love to see an editor, but I sit there with my Kemper.
Those things are consumer level. Those are not pro level things, because you're already going to have an interface if you're doing a lot of recording.
Yeah, you probably paid a lot of money for an interface already. You're not going to just...
Right.
And that's why I go back to the Line 6 puts in these features so that it's attractive to these people. It's not...
Because they're a huge company, and they're looking at numbers of people and numbers of units.
Yeah, they're not trying to compete with UA. UA does their thing. And to me, even if I watch how UA puts together their UI, the graphics they use, they're 100% speaking to recording engineers, to people who are used to this stuff. The Auxbox software shows pictures that look like the studio you wish you had. You know what I mean? Like on the screen.
Their target audience is high-grade professionals, like studio people.
Line 6, I get it. I asked, why your editor looks like a video game? Why is it black and red and everything? And they said, well, we made it on the screen so you can see it in low light conditions. We then wanted it to be a seamless sort of transition, whether you're using it on the screen or on your big screen on a computer. So we made it the same color scheme. That's a totally reasonable explanation. That's a really good reason to design it that way. I think that's practically a good reason. That's for the player, though.
Right.
UA is not considering low light conditions for their anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? So...
Line 6 is doing
I think it's
a
great
good
stuff.
job.
I'm a big Line 6 fan. I have an HX Stomp, an HX Effects, and an HX Helix. You know what I mean? So, we're fans, but...
Absolutely. And I think they're doing a good job of creating a pro enough quality sound that you can get there, especially with these new reverbs and stuff.
Yeah.
Some of those new reverbs are really good. And putting a Klon and a Timmy, those are the two pedals I've had on my board for 15 years. I don't know if they called me and said, hey, or I don't know. It's funny that those are the two models they added.
I told them that you were...
Isn't that weird? But they're trying to skirt that line. But they made their bread and butter selling Spider amps, to beginning guitar players.
They're not ignoring.
They can't, ignore all those people.
Yeah,
they want to hook them with the Spiders and then push them into the more pro level stuff. Yeah, and the Helix is not bad.
Look at what the HX Stomp is. To even suggest that a Line 6 Helix is too large to take anywhere on an airplane or something, that you would need a smaller unit, they're creating a product not because there's like a huge market need for a mini Helix, but because it's now a pedal board direct solution for guitar players.
Absolutely. People that have their Strymons and want all that, but they don't have to run through a cabinet and go direct.
Yeah, and that's totally an ease of use thing. It's not a.
That was actually a smart box, I thought,
It's
for
the
them to
smartest.
make.
I did a whole podcast on why I think this is the smartest piece of equipment ever released anywhere. I honestly was confused why their power cab didn't seem to go all the way where I thought it should go. If you put a load box in the power cab, you would have a box that any musician could say, I already carry a cab and I already carry an amp. And I could take this lightweight cab with a load box, run an IR, send that direct out, and I can run that same IR through my cab, or I can model speakers and send that modeling out direct. And I could run direct and have a speaker on stage. So I don't even need mics anymore. To me, the market could be way bigger for that power cab.
Oh, yeah.
But, they didn't call me. I called them. They didn't return my calls. It's the whole thing. Let's see. Do we have any other good questions here? There's some questions.
I've never had the need for an editor with the Kemper. And I see, and I've worked with the Fractal editor. I've worked with the Helix editor. I don't want to say it's a time suck, but I do spend more time looking at it. And I think the Kemper is just intuitively turn something off from the face, never go more than 2 pages of menu diving. I find I can get around way quicker on that than I ever could on any of the other editors.
I think that's a fair point. I'm not like dying for an editor, but I would like to see one. I'll tell you one reason I would like to see one is I think that the biggest thing limiting the Kemper in terms of what we are allowed to do with it is not any software limitations, but it's really the front design of the box. They designed it to look like this. So I've asked them about the reverb. Why does it say reverb? And their answer is because reverb usually goes at the end.
Right.
Why does it say delay? Delay usually goes in. Why does it say mod? Mod usually goes. Why does it say X? In case you want to run something else. Right? So totally to be like, they were bringing this box out when digital wasn't cool.
Right.
And they have to educate the consumer. It has to be a product you can look at and know what it does, know what I'm supposed to do. But because of that, we're now sort of locked into this 4 effects in the back, 4 effects in the front. But look, the EQ can go pre or post amp block, even though it's physically right there.
Right.
They gave us that. I've asked, can you make this stuff go anywhere? Yes. Can the EQ block, instead of being that EQ on the front, could I put a graphic EQ in there? The answer is, yeah, we could do that. The answer to all these questions that I asked seem to be, we can do anything. I would love to see an editor that unlocked some of those and made it a little more like that so that I could maybe do more. Now, I'm not running into practically a point where 4 in the back and 4 in front is not enough. But maybe,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I think if you're using that many effects, you need to be a keyboard player. You're not trying to sound like a guitar
It's probably
anymore.
true.
I'm
It's
just
probably
kidding.
true.
I'm a Luddite when it comes to that. It's like the fewest things I could possibly run through.
Yeah.
But I still like my wacky sounds here and there. But I haven't gotten close to turning all the lights on in the top row. So
Well, you're a player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what I notice. There's a type of guy that spends to a degree. I just enjoy working with the stuff.
yeah,
Then to another degree, I realize I have to go take it out. But that's why I both am trying to profile the world, right?
Yeah.
And every iteration, right? It like fascinates me. But also I play the same profiles every week.
yeah. Well, that's a great thing about the praise and worship place. I mean, there's guitar players that are playing 2-3 days a week, same venues, over and over and over and over. A lot of the guys that play Broadway, for instance, in Nashville, they're in this club one week, this club another week. The environment's different. I think the praise and worship groups are in a good position. They're in a good position to keep improving their tone.
Oh, it's a total deluxe gig.
Yeah.
And deluxe is
Because even us, we play different venues every day.
right.
You know,
But you're bringing your own soundboard and everything, but still it's all different, right?
Right. PA speakers are different, but yeah, we bring our own board console.
Right.
But yeah, it's just, it's a prime position to really fine tune what you're doing.
Right.
And see, I love the new reverbs, and I haven't figured out a place to put them yet. And it's purely the kind of music we play. If I start adding too much reverb, my guitar goes from here to back here, and I don't want that. There's already a piano player taking up room. There's a bass player and a steel player. I've got my little spot in the middle.
Yeah.
And if you start throwing a bunch of stuff, it starts backing out of the mix. And so I have to stay, I don't want to say drier, but I'll put a lot of delays on there because it's actually note, but trying to put reverb which is just basically noise. It's ambient noise.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to push it further away from right in your face.
A lot of times that's the sound, that they're going for, and you hear these bands like Bethel and stuff.
Oh, that sounds
and
amazing.
And they do that. It's thick, it's lush, but they have a lot of key stuff.
Yeah.
But what I notice is a lot of times the key stuff is maybe going more synth, and the guitar stuff is taking more of the pad stuff. Right. You just said something that was really profound. It really got me thinking, which was, it's probably the Sunday morning environment that's actually allowing people to get to new levels of like obsession over the minutia of their tone. Because
before that, the reverb was just, there's reverb, it's on,
right,
you're done.
Right.
It's now it's a part of the. I mean, it's part of your sound.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. What's funny is I was just talking to a guy named James Duke, who's a big praise and worship player, a guy in town here, goes on tour with a bunch of people, does records for people, and he was telling me all about. He's like, I don't even use reverb, I use delay. He's like, and I'm known for this big washy sound because he did this record, this John Mark McMillan record, and people say this is like the modern classic of Sunday tone, Yeah. It's a little more rockin' than other stuff, but he's like, I don't even use verb. I'm like a delay guy,
Yeah.
It's so fun, but and he plays a little more mid-rangey, a little more rockin' than other people.
See, I always tend to use more delay than reverb anyway. But now with these new reverbs, I don't have to try to incorporate some of them, especially the ones like you're using with the octaves and stuff.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, I was digging this.
Of course, some of that was I haven't checked it out yet, but.
Yeah. It's good. You requested it. So
I did. I said, how do you get that?
I said that. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping now that the morphing is in there and correct on it, because this new beta took away some of the morphing on that reverb.
I love morphing.
Oh, it's so good. That's the single greatest feature in terms of
I love it.
Just what it makes it do.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have your morphing set up? Now, you've told me that you are morphing the tube screamer sometimes.
Yeah.
Up and down.
Yeah.
Are you ever morphing just more and less delay and verb?
Oh, yeah.
To get more and more what?
Yeah, I like using it for effects typically instead of reaching up to that second row, because if I'm singing or busy, trying to look down over the mic or whatever and hit that second row is sometimes trickier. So if I've got a tremolo coming in the second verse of a song, I'll put it on the morph. And I love that you can change the ramp time per rig, so it can kind of swell in and swell out of the. And I do the same thing with the rotary speaker on a couple songs, and then lead tones. If I've just got my basic crunch tone, I'll almost always have morphing it to adding that tube screamer at 50 to 60%.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just brilliant. But I'll also, at the same time I do that, I'll turn the delay mix up, and different stuff's changing.
People go through so much and spend so much money to get that capability on a rig.
Oh, I know.
All these different pedals, and it's just built in, and it's easy, and you can assign different pedals to just do different stuff.
Yeah.
You can have one for wetness, one for dirt, one that just does this, one for wah, one for volume, and those things can change. They really did get it right when they thought, how's a guitar player going to use this? That's the thing I never hear people complain about. That I never really hear people complain there's stuff they can't do on their Kemper. Like, that's functional things a guitar would want to do.
Right.
I have heard people say, what if I want 9 reverbs?
Right.
Well, it's like,
we have an effects loop for that.
Right. We get another Kemper.
Yeah.
Favorite profile. We should wrap this up. It's getting pretty long. Favorite profile of all time. If you could only have one.
Well,
not if you could have one, but just favorite profile.
After that Christmas tour, I mean, that LDW clean sound is pretty amazing. My 72 Marshall, I've got a couple that I've done. I don't even know if they're actually the same ones that are in packs. Because I always try to, since I own this one stable of amps that I can profile over and over and over, I do. I'll just think, I want to see if I can beat that one. And so anyway, I've got this 72 Marshall lead tone that I like. And then probably that LDW for the clean. Those are, even to this day, in my third power clean, I've used that over and over. In the third power with the Klon, I've probably got 4 or 5 that are always in, like, you can't see one of our Lone Star shows without hearing those rigs.
Right. Somebody asked me this night, or somebody asked us, what's your favorite Lone Star song to play? That's tough. I mean, Amazed is always cool because it's such a big song. Yeah. But I love... It's such a big song. Huge.
Yeah, it was a big one.
It was more than big. That was a Titanic of a song.
It was, actually. Yeah. We got lucky. And some of the guitar on that is actually a pod farm, I think, even. Dan Huff added like a rhythm guitar pod farm.
That was me falling on the floor.
Yeah.
I was like, I got
The solo I know I did with a Fender Pro Sonic on that, and I can't remember what we did. Well, the clean chorus stuff was probably Dan. When Dan Huff was producing that record, he and I would both track. Mm-hmm. So we're both playing guitar on the track. Mm-hmm. And then I would come in and overdub solos. And then when he's mixing down, if he felt like it needed something else, he literally would go into Pod Farm on his computer and add just like a background layered part.
What does that say about the sort of stigma of something and how it actually sounds?
Oh, I know. People wouldn't know in a million years. Our last 2 records, I've used the Kemper completely. I mean, tracked with it, did overdubs.
Yeah.
And I think I can just listen to that compared to my old records, and I think the tones on this are better, and it's a Kemper.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's no telling when you hear a record, you're not hearing the amp anymore. You're hearing the EQ that's on the amp. And those engineers are so good. They will find a sonic space for it. They will double, triple track it, when you're going down, and just, it's crazy. Trying to recreate a record is a unique thing. And I feel it's best not to even try, because I've known friends in cover bands that will try to copy every song tone-wise. Right. And it doesn't work. It's just too varied.
Right.
It's best just to get, and people have asked me, they'll send me, hey, can you give me a tone for this song? I was like, get a slightly clean sound and EQ it to where you think it's close. I mean, at the end of the day, most people aren't going to say that sounded just like, Van Halen 1.
Yeah. They don't remember.
Because Van Halen 1 it's a really crappy guitar tone.
Yeah.
It's the fact that he played his butt off that made it classic.
Yeah.
There's no low end. Had a buzz so bad, that's why it's panned to one side. They threw reverb on the other side. It's just, they said they were fighting it because it was so noisy. And it is good because it shows all of his tapping stuff. It's got so much high end and clarity. You hear all the details. But as a tone, I would not want that tone. If I played through that, it would sound like a chainsaw.
That's Dimebag Darrell's thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's objectively bad tone. Mm-hmm. It sounds like Velcro. Yeah. But that's their sound.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's like it sounds almost like a white noise on a television. Yeah. If you could play your guitar.
And then I hear certain records by a guy named Jude Cole out of California, huge fan of his for years and years. He keeps putting out music. Guitar tones are stellar. Better than anything I hear on the radio. Like, nobody ever hears them. It's like, it's so subjective, and it doesn't matter. No. Now, he's got nice stuff, but it's just like, man, the guitar tones are just awesome. Yeah. I want my guitar to sound that good.
Right.
But
you should go profile his stuff.
Yeah, I should. Yeah. He didn't need me.
No, for you. You can take the tones.
I don't know that I could capture it.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
It's because I tend to take any amp that I'm profiling and I try to make it sound good to me, which I'll EQ it to where I like it and blah, blah, blah. And it ends up sounding like me at the end of the day anyway. That's why the Top Jimmy guy's better at the Sin Mix for the heavy stuff. I'll try to screw it up to make it sound like what I want it to sound like instead of just making it sound good for that style.
No, that's why people will they'll comment on our stuff. And I think you have, I saw in something you wrote where you summed it up, the signature warm sound or something you put.
Oh, did I?
Did you put that on something? But that's what I hear. People will say, yeah, I think your things are warmer. Mine are a little brighter, but I've had people criticize me and say, I don't feel like there's enough low mids in your profiles. And I go,
they sound good to me.
Well, yeah, they sound good to me. I'm like, well, I
can make them sound.
I could. In my head, it's like, if you want more low mids, have you tried the Tweed Lowman, the basement? You know what I mean? Like, I would go to an amp with more low mids, but we use different guitars. We use different. We're listening different, and we want different things out of. And I think that's true of all sorts of players. That's why I've tried to make all those videos, those tips and tricks videos, because when I walked into the Kemper doors, I thought, my God, this unit is amazing. Oh my word, no one knows what they're doing with it.
Right.
And it was like, I couldn't believe how this sort of weird stigma of like, it has to be exactly as the profiler delivered it to me, or if it's not the true authentic tube tone, I'm going to destroy it if I turn a knob. And it's like, I've met so many names in Nashville and talk with them about gear and stuff. And I should have been doing it on a podcast. But
We should have had a podcast that one lunch with Sean and Chris.
yeah. But you included, I never meet guys who are like, no, I got to do this so I can get that real tube tone. It's just not practical.
Yeah.
And it's just, you do what sounds good, you know, whatever that is.
Well,
Whatever
and
that
I'll
is.
always try to make it sound like me, whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
You know, it's just what I gravitate
Yeah.
towards, and I can't not.
Right.
Because I've just been training my ears, and my ears change.
Yeah.
The first profiles are darker. I listen back now, and I think, yeah, I had treble. How hard is that? You turn the treble and pleasance up.
Yeah.
And it also depends on how much I've been on the road. If we're on busy tour season, my ears are hammered. Because like it or not, I mean, I'll turn it up too loud on my ear monitors and I've got tinnitus right now. I can hear it ringing.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's awful. It's just I play with a really loud drummer and he hits his cymbals really hard and sometimes I'm really close to them. So I mean, over the years,
You got to start playing with these, like that guy from Lincoln Park. These big over the ear.
So I keep my left ear in to kind of block his cymbals, but at the same time, and I try to really keep the volume lower because if I put them both in, then it closes everything out. And I feel like I have to turn them up louder to get the energy. So I do what you're not supposed to do, which is only use one ear.
That's what I do too.
But I hear the room, I hear the people, you know, the crowd. I hear clarity of my vocal if I need it out of this ear. I hear clarity guitar, and I hear the warmth, and to me it works. But if I'm not careful, every now and then I'll bump it up too loud.
Yeah, because you guys aren't pulling any punches with the harmonies.
No, it's a lot of singing.
You're busy.
Yeah.
And you've got to handle all that, which the Kemper lets you change all those parameters at once.
It does.
One button. You don't have to tap dance.
Yeah.
Could you, if you didn't use a Kemper, if you built a whole pedal board, could you do a Lone Star gig and tap dance all the things you would need to tap dance and sing the things?
I could, and I've done it.
Yeah,
but it is a pain in the
right,
butt.
right.
Yeah, it's a lot of, and just stupid stuff you don't even think about it, because once you've been on the Kemper for a while, you don't even think about it. I'm going to a solo, hit my gain pedal up to get my solo tone, and go hit my delay pedal. It's like two things you'd have to sit there, because I want a different delay or longer repeats or whatever for a big ballad solo. Now I just hit one button and it changes all that. But instead of hitting this and that, and then when you're done, backwards, it's just a lot of extra work. And I'm all about making my life easy.
Are all your morphs on the expression pedal?
None of them are.
None
I
of
don't
them.
use the expression pedal.
You just
for morph.
use the...
And that was another thing when I made the remote. They had the two LEDs on there. It's like they knew they were coming out with that. It wasn't even out at the time.
Yes.
It's just it was overbuilt.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
That's how I do it too. And I've been trying to work. I want to work in an expression pedal.
Yeah.
And what I want to do is take my more delay and more reverby sounds and push them up even higher.
Yeah.
And then that way I get all the in-between stuff. So I can have like a here's in the middle, and then I could do, because one of the things I miss, I used to do this with the Line 6 stuff, was put the runaway thing on the toe.
Oh yeah.
And I used to do this thing where I would play quarter notes, but I would have the delay set to a quarter note delay. And if you play like sort of a descending line, you start getting both tones go over each other. It's like a little mini doubled line kind of thing. And it's not the most useful all the time, but it's a fun trick. And
Exactly.
it's one of those tricks that when other guitar players come on, it's like sounded great. It's like, check this out, right?
Yeah.
And it's a cool thing. It's a bedroom thing. Well, this has gone the usual length of a podcast.
So
I think
2 hours. Yeah.
Oh, I think fastest 2 hours I've spent all
That's
day.
funny.
So, well, we both got loaded Kempers from British Audio. People should go check those out. If you're in the market for a Kemper, you'd be a fool not to pick up
Absolutely.
the Mbritt loaded Kemper or the Tone Junkie loaded Kemper.
Either one, you can't go wrong.
You really can't. You really can.
And Shane's such a good guy. Sean, did I say Shane?
I don't know Sean.
Such a good guy. I know it's Shane. I don't know why I said Sean.
No, Shane is a great guy. And they've even got, now, you're using the remote.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any problem with the jack on the back of the remote with the Cat 5?
No.
Never. Because, people have problems where they can't get it to connect every now and then. And Shane has a really cool mod. Have you seen that mod he's doing? Okay, so, and you can do this mod, and because of this mod, because they're a licensed repair center, your Kemper's still under warranty. He removes that Cat 5 jack, takes it out and moves it, And it's the same type of Cat 5 with that XLR glove over it that I don't know what you call that thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that you have on the end of the remote. And then he sells you a heavy duty, well, it comes with the mod. I think it's like $100 for the mod. He mods the Kemper, and then he gives you a heavy duty cable, and you can get it in, I think, any length.
So you're not talking about on the remote, you're talking about on the Kemper itself.
On the Kemper itself.
So now that I have had a problem with, only because the little tab breaks off.
The little tab can break off because that's not really designed for road use.
Right.
But he has a mod where it's like the remote connection on both sides.
Brilliant.
So on the back of the Kemper, and your Kemper's still under warranty because they're a...
I need to get that on my road one because right now there's literally a piece of gaff tape holding that cord in. And because the tab's broken off, and I'm too lazy to swap the cable out.
And I find those things to be very sensitive because even mine's not broken, but when it's plugged in, I will hold it in and it'll connect, and then I can let it go. But if it kind of just unseats slightly, it won't connect right away. Yeah, you know, it takes a little bit of time.
I've got like 2 or 3 backup cables, but the one that I'm using now is, I don't remember where I got it, but it was not the stock cable. It's not stiff. Yeah. So it lays flat, easy to tape down and all that. So that's the only reason I have it.
Yeah, I want to go get it done on one of mine and maybe do a little video of going over there and having it done because I think it's a cool...
Yeah, that sounds good.
It's a cool trick.
It doesn't get in the way of the other jacks, the USB jack?
No, because he moves it.
Okay.
So he takes that lead and brings it up to like the top corner. Okay. So it's not crowded. That jack is still there, but not working.
I gotcha.
Yeah, it doesn't get in the way or anything. It looks cool. It's on his website. It's on the BritishAudio.com. Shout out to them because, they're a cool place that sells loaded Kempers with our stuff. Last thing I'll say, thank you for coming on, man.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. We should do this again.
We should.
Over hot chicken. Over hot chicken. We can bring the hot chicken right in here. What do you got coming out next? What are you working on? What's coming out from Mbritt?
That is a good question. I've done some acoustic stuff. I'm not sure if that's going to work.
You just did your last 2 packs, similar name. What was the...
Grab and Go and the Crank and Go.
Crank and Go.
Yeah.
Crank and Go was the last one.
Yeah, and it's more higher gain stuff. Yeah. Soldano SLO 100. That was a good one.
Well, you tease these guys a little. You were telling me an amp.
So the Crank and Go is good. Yeah. The Friedman BE50.
Okay. Yeah.
And the Soldano I really like.
Yeah.
What was I telling you?
And that's out and stuff. Well, you had a new amp that you were really digging.
I've got a Top Hat King Royal. It's
the Pro Reverb. But yes. I forgot. You were telling me about the Top Hat.
Yeah, I love the Top Hat. I'm going to somehow figure out how to get that out. I picked up a Carol Ann Trip R.
Yeah.
I haven't even started profiling that yet. I had a head cold over Christmas holidays, and I do not trust my ears just yet. Yeah. They're still a little crackly. So I'm trying to let them heal before I start doing actual profiling.
Sure.
And I've got a 67 Pro Reverb that's in the shop. I've tried profiling it, and it is not liking the profiling process. So I'm hoping it's just a bad filter cap or something.
Right.
But once that gets done, that's... Between that and the Top Hat, man, it's almost... I hate to say it, it's almost making me want to bring real amps out again, and then I start thinking about all the headache it would be, and then I think, well, I'll just try to profile it.
Right.
And then I'm trying to work on some... You've made some, too, the HX Stomp
I just made one free sort of thing.
Yeah, so I may try to do something for that. And they're not going to be...
You know that you
can I've already got some.
Well,
so I've copied and pasted stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say is, you can just bring over your stuff and limit the amount of blocks you're using.
And I've done that. I just haven't... I never know, like, how many is enough to warrant paying for it. And I've also talked to Line 6 about just giving them some to put in this, to put in there. Just because if I'm using stock cabs and I'm not doing my own IRs, I feel like I'm just turning numbers, and how much is that really worth? So
I hear you. But you have your IRs you can put in there.
I do, and I'm constantly fighting. It is a rabbit hole, This one sounds good on this hand, but then it needs this, and I try to find another one that has that, and it's just a...
That is the great thing about the Kemper. It's one signal chain that you can sort of sign off on.
Yep.
I'm trying to start doing IRs because that's been a request I've been getting a lot. And so you can see my little mic shelf over there.
Very nice.
I've got the C414 up there. I've got a couple pairs of fat heads.
Nice.
121. I think there's a 421 up there, and then the usual stuff. And then I haven't used these, but John Mayer uses them live.
Yeah, I've seen that.
But they're working. Thank you so much for coming on,
You're welcome.
Michael. And
you have to come over to my pad and look at all my guitars next
anytime.
time.
You are the Coca-Cola of the Kemper, sir.
I don't know what that means.
It means
New Coke or old Coke?
Oh,
Coke Classic?
Just a good Coke.
Okay.
You know what I mean? When I first started doing this, I still have your stuff on my Kemper. I could literally show you that right now. That's not a bluff.
That's funny.
Your JRT is still one of my favorite ones. Me and the Sues, we both used that for a long time. I started making profiles, started using some of the ones I was making. But I still have your Silver Jubilee stuff on there.
Oh, wow. I never could get into that amp.
No, I have one. I'm about to profile.
I saw that. It looks nice.
It's a great one. It's an 87.
Nice.
And no, but your Jubilee, the red. You have the red pedal running, I think, into a Marshall.
Yeah.
On one of those. Yeah, I mean, there's so much great stuff. And for me, I knew early on. I thought, well, gosh, I'm hoping to be mentioned one day in the same breath as this guy's stuff. That's the truth. That is the absolute truth. So thank you so much. And you've been uber
I don't even
cool.
have my own merch. You're blowing me out of the water on the merch.
I can, don't worry. I know a hat guy. No, but thanks so much, man. And you've always been super cool. Like when I got here, I think I reached out and you were like, hey, let's get together. You've introduced me to people, so appreciate you.
You seem like a nice guy.
Thanks, man. I seem like you should see me when the camera goes up.
No, you're a good dude. And
so
I like talking shop because I don't get to talk shop with many people.
Agreed. That's why sometimes I just talk to myself.
Yeah. That's funny.
So let's do this. When your next pack is coming out or whatever,
okay,
get on here and let's talk about it.
Do it.
And come on anytime. I'll buy the hot chicken.
Sounds good.
This has been episode 39 of the new Tone Junkie Podcast. Tone Junkie Podcast 2.0.
2.0.
Here it is. There's a video edition. And man, we got to get some cool sound effects. I think that's the next thing.
Yeah, we need one of those little sampler pads. You can just play all the different sound effects.
That'd be really good.
Yeah.
All right, HW, Mbritt, out.